A True Story by Lucian of Samosata. This book is definitely not true. The book was written in the 2nd century AD and was purposely built to poke fun at the fiction in stories like the Odyssey. The book itself is quite the adventure, but reads differently than what a modern reader is used to reading. The book doesn't really have dialogue, but more or less has a synopsis of action elements. It's a very short book, with my copy ending at 93 pages, but those limitations do not stop the book from having a huge quantity of ideas. World building. First and foremost, the imagery and creativity on display is absolutely fantastic in this book. The crew in this book encounter a wide variety of animals and people. They encounter tree women that seduce 2 of their members. The ship they ride upon gets taken up in a whirlwind into the moon, and they encounter moon people. The moon people are at war with the sun people. There are giant spiderwebs for the foot soldiers to crawl upon to get to the sun. There are huge gnats flying people around. Some soldiers fight using asparagus and mushroom shields. Others fight alongside men with dog faces. There are flying acorns, men who birth kids from their calves. They meet people with lobster faces in the belly of a 200-mile long whale. This book is a plethora of ideas all smashed together into one book. Every page has something new to discover, especially at the beginning. If you're an aspiring fantasy writer or you're a writer in any capacity, then this is a really good book to read. It's got a ton of divergent ideas. So if you're looking or you're having a little bit of writer's block, this is a pretty good book to kind of bring some creativity back in. Characters. The characters of the story are there, but not as relevant to the story. There is almost no dialogue throughout the book, and the pages really read more like a travel log instead of a character-driven story. However, that doesn't mean there aren't interesting people. It's just more that the interesting people are contextually based. At one point, Lucian comes across the Island of the Blessed, where the heroes of the Trojan War and other mythical beings reside. As someone who has read the Iliad by Homer, these segments are exciting, seeing former characters in this new light, but I struggled during the sections talking about Odysseus from the Odyssey because I have yet to read that book. Do I think it's necessary to read the Iliad and the Odyssey before reading this book? No, but I do think it's helpful to the reader in better understanding this book. Pacing. The pacing is okay. It's off and on. When you get to the Island of the Blessed, it feels like you've reached this like heavenly place in the story, but Lucian still has to go through the trouble of finding a way home, and the story itself ends on a cliffhanger with the reader never finding out if Lucian does return home. In honesty, with such a short book, these pacing issues don't really matter too much. Just don't expect a traditional story circle to take place throughout the novel. Science fiction or fantasy. This book is science fiction and fantasy together. There's been some discussion regarding what is the first science fiction novel, with some people saying the Epic of Gilgamesh, some saying A True Story, and Google saying Frankenstein. If you look at what's delved into in A True Story, there is a fair argument that it could be science fiction, but it's really up to the reader. I think it's close, but it reads like a science fiction fantasy genre bender. So if you're someone who's into sci-fi, or maybe you're into fantasy, this book might be a good starting point for either genre. Conclusion. This is a good book. It's a fun book. It's got a lot of cool ideas. It's different than what you're typically going to read. It's super short, and if you're running out of ideas for some creative writing, this book offers a lot of cool concepts. It's not a literary masterpiece, but it wasn't written to be a literary masterpiece. If you read the Iliad and the Odyssey and you like those books, then this book could be a great little side story. If you haven't, then it's a fun dive into a very different world written by someone into a very different time. So go check it out. Outro. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any good book ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm going to try increasing my editing skills and production skills. Maybe I'll delve not into books, but maybe movies or video games. So keep tuning in and we'll see what piques my interest. Also, I started a podcast with my friend from work. It's called Two Grizzly Bears, so go check it out if you're interested. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you guys next week.